Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Closing Arguments. I'm Ted Rowlands, in tonight for Vinnie Politan, and if you haven't seen the breaking news, we're gonna fill you in. Donna Adelson, this evening, the jury took a little while to get to a verdict, but they found her guilty on all counts. They were in the courtroom past 7 o'clock at night. Almost 8 o'clock when the verdict came in. If you missed it, it's something else. You've got to hear, but also see the reaction of the defendant as Judge Everett read the guilty verdicts.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment, first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Mrs. Adelson, control yourself. Count 2, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the indictment, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Count 3, we, the jury, find as follows as to count 3 of the indictment, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And it is signed and dated by the foreperson.
Donna sending that message loud and clear. I didn't do this. And I think maybe a little part of her thinks that maybe, just maybe, this is all going to get cleared up someday. It isn't. She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. She'll be sentenced officially October 14th. They pushed it back to do a pre-sentencing report. Let's head out to Tallahassee and get some reaction to this monumental day in this prosecution. Julia Janae, Court TV anchor, is outside of the courthouse right now. And Julia, let's start with the verdict. Your reaction, what did you see, hear, and feel in the courtroom? It was dramatic enough on television. I can only imagine what it was like inside the courtroom.
Dramatic, heavy. I did not expect it to be as heavy as it was, and you've heard it said by other parties of this case that this trial felt different. There were so many things that were different about it. It's the 4th trial, and that reaction that everyone just saw, I was inside the courtroom for that. First, I want to start with the Markel family because they were there on the prosecution side, this being their 4th trial attending, and something you can expect from them throughout the trial is they have this amazing composure. Regardless of what's being shown on the screen, what's coming out of the witness stand, they are very calm and don't get emotional in a way that would distract the jury. Donna Adelson, on the other hand, we expected was going to have some outbursts throughout this trial because she was that way during pre-trial. She talked over her attorney, sometimes spoke up when she wasn't supposed to. But I have commented that throughout this trial, she has been very much following the decorum of the courthouse. That changed in the moment that she heard the word guilty of first-degree murder. It's like she could not hold it in anymore. Everything that she wanted to do throughout this trial, she was yelling, she was shaking visibly throughout. I mean, she really didn't stop shaking. And I even thought I heard her say, "I'm innocent," while she was reacting to what the jury said. They kept their faces pretty stone-faced, though upbeat, when the foreperson said, "We have reached a verdict," and they were quickly ushered out, knowing that this was because the defendant was reacting in that way. So it was quite a moment. It was very heavy, and it felt more personal to all of the people involved, including the prosecutor. I wanted to play a clip because I know you watched most of the interview, the press conference that Georgia Kappelman did at the end of all of this, and there was a final question that I want you to listen to that she answered having to do with more victims in this case. Georgia, it felt like this trial, you did mention Wendy's name more. Was that just because of who the defendant was, or is there a strategy behind more evidence against Wendy coming out?
I think it was because of who the defendant was and how important the motive was to establish, which largely arose from the communications between Donna and Wendy. So yeah, Wendy ended up more in the mix.
You say a little bit about the boys. I could feel the emotion. It seemed like it really resonated with the jury when you talked about.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, there's no justice for them, and I haven't done them any favors today, and I lose sleep over that fact. It's tough. I know that, yeah, the family's just been totally destroyed, and I hate that, you know, and sometimes it feels a little bit like being a part of it, you know? So, yeah, I wish them nothing but the best, and I hope they can reconnect with their paternal relatives and get past this. Yep.
Georgia needs to go to sleep now. Georgia hasn't slept in quite a while. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
Ted, that just added to the heaviness of the day. But Georgia Kappelman there just reacting in a way that you want prosecutors to be thinking about all parties involved in the tough decisions that they had to make. But this was important, and she said it throughout that press conference that this one did feel different.
Yeah, and it was, you could feel the emotion from here, and you just summed it up for us with the emotion there. Stand by, Julia. We're going to be with you throughout the hour, getting more reaction. But right now we want to bring in our think tank in Massachusetts, Richard Grundy. He's still with us from last hour. Also, Joanne Neves, she was a student of Dan Markel at Florida State University and a retired police commander and host of Profiling Evil. Our friend Mike King is joining us from Denver, Colorado, where he'll be attending CrimeCon with Vinnie and the rest of our Court TV posse that's headed out there as we speak. Mike, we haven't gotten your reaction yet. What is your reaction to this verdict? And you know, add in Donna's reaction as well that was so visible.
Yeah, you know, Ted, it really happened faster than I thought it would happen. And I heard Julia talk about being in there and the emotion she felt when she was there. Gosh, I felt that sitting in my hotel room because I ran upstairs when I heard that the verdict was ready. I found it interesting. Donna was very emotional, and yet I didn't see her wiping any tears. And it's not saying anything one way or another, because I don't know what her personality is like. But I'll tell you what, I thought the prosecution did a great job of, in my mind, I still have a vision of that train, that clear chain of communication that talked about information flowing downstream from Donna through Charlie and then back upstream. And I thought that was really, really powerful. I thought that the prosecution did a great job of hitting a really strong motive around the custody battles. And again, that trip to Vietnam, I think, was incredibly powerful, more than they ever tried the more they tried to lessen it, the more important it became to me. But I'll tell you what, it was a pretty emotional thing to watch this thing. And gosh, we've been through a number of trials together looking at this case.
Yeah, and there may be more. Richard Grundy, listening to Prosecutor Kappelman afterwards and reading the tea leaves, do you think that there will be more Adelsons to be indicted, specifically possibly Wendy?
So if you hearken back to what I said earlier on about, you know, this shows the real extent of a dedicated case in individuals in the district attorney's office. I think that sheds some light on this as well. And I can't imagine, quite frankly, based on all the evidence that we've heard in all of these trials, that they would feel that they can rest on this matter without going after Wendy. There is a point in time in the prosecution office when, if you have the information that you are 100% certain that this person is involved, you get to the point where the case is never going to get any better, and we try it, and the jury makes their decision. You don't win all of them. And from what I see in this office, those tea leaves say that they're going to get to that point with Wendy, and I'm guessing that it will be sooner rather than later.
And Joanna, we saw in the closing arguments, there was a lot of Wendy talk. Wendy's name came up, as was talked about in that press conference afterwards, more than it did in Charlie's case. And there was a lot of Wendy in that case. And if you're going to connect these dots, it just seems hard to comprehend that any family, even this family, would, as a gift, knock off your ex without telling you. And it just doesn't make any sense. What is your take on the possibility of a prosecution of Wendy?
Yeah, I'm going to use one of the words that the defense attorney repeated multiple times in closing arguments. I think it's unbelievable that Wendy was so far removed from this situation, and that her brother and her mother would just insulate her from this crime when it all centered around her children and her ex-husband. I do think that everyone is waiting to see, a prosecution of Wendy. Everyone who's invested in the way the state is pursuing this case, seeing her tried for her involvement in the matter, and you'll probably see similar charges to what were assessed against Donna.
Mike King, the other man on that screen there, Harvey, his name hasn't been brought up as much, but we did learn that he did make a few interesting phone calls, including apparently to the hitman at one point in this scenario. He's sort of been on standby. He's been there for Donna, been in the courtroom, was there, ready to jump on that flight to Vietnam. What about Harvey?
Boy, I'll tell you what, Ted, I don't know that anybody in that family is safe except for Robert. I mean, they all appear to be very close to each other. They appear to be colluding in many different ways. I find it interesting that he wasn't called to testify in one way or another. I found it interesting that Wendy was called and that she actually agreed to come rather than saying she wouldn't incriminate herself. So this whole thing, I'm like on a fence that I keep leaning one way and then the next day I lean the other way. And he had enough understanding that he agreed to jump on a one-way ticket plane to Vietnam. And that tells me there's a whole lot more bubbling in the pot than we're aware of at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to hit a break here. Richard, you were a prosecutor for a long time, did some big cases. You ever get a standing ovation when you walked out of a courtroom? What was, you watched that? That was something special, huh?
You know what? I'm not as pretty as Georgia Kappelman, but I thought I was a pretty good prosecutor, and I got something along those lines a couple of times.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was well deserved. But that was a unique moment. We see it every now and then on court TV where the investment and the appreciation for, as you pointed out, this is hard work. In a case like this with so many tentacles, so many people, so much information, it is all-consuming, and she justifiably so received that standing ovation. Let's get a break. When we come back, we'll continue to react to the guilty verdicts against Donna Adelson. She's shocked. How about you? Did you think this was the right verdict? We'll talk about this more. Our Julia Janae is going to be rejoining us as well. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. This is Closing Arguments.
Coming soon to Court TV.
The Microsoft executive gunned down. Now his ex and her new husband are charged with his murder.
Brian Walsh, accused of murdering his wife, Anna.
It's very disturbing, very heart-wrenching.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Why do you have something against me?
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon. Only on Court TV.
It is a murder of grief, a murder of selfishly prioritizing one's own desires over what is just or right. And at its core, this was a murder of convenience, so that one grandmother could live closer to her grandchildren. She killed their father and ripped the children from the other grandparents' lives.
Welcome back to Closing Arguments. I'm Ted Rowlands, in for Vinnie tonight. You saw Ruth Markel there delivering a victim impact statement, and Donna over at the defense table shaking her head in denial. This isn't me you're talking about, is what Donna wants us to think. But boy, did Ruth Markel hit it out of the park. So did Phil, her husband. Let's bring back Court TV anchor Julia Janae outside the courthouse. Was inside the courtroom during all of this. Let's start with those victim impact statements. They were ready to roll, and boy, they delivered both of them.
Absolutely, Ted. And that's what was different this trial as well. In Charlie's trial, there was a sentencing hearing that happened later, and the victim impact statements had to be done in part. Phil did his remotely, so it was via Zoom. this felt so different inside of that courtroom, hearing Ruth talk about this being done for greed, and Phil talking about all of the children, not just the 2 grandkids at the center of this, but Catherine McBanawa's children, Sigfredo Garcia's children, Luis Rivera has children. There's so many children who are left without parents because of what he said, Donna's action. To see that dynamic in the room of parents and parents of children. They shared children who were married to each other at one point, and they haven't spoken, no doubt, since. But yet, in this moment, they are able to say something to each other, and Phil saying he wanted at least to ask her, even though in Florida you're not allowed to address the defendant directly. He wanted to know, was it worth it? This case has impacted so many people. That gallery was packed. You heard the applause. That really wasn't from the media. It sounded like it was because of the press conference setting, but it was from all of these supporters, people who support them online, who have YouTube pages that have become dedicated to this case. I met a woman who traveled here from the United Kingdom. She watches Court TV there, and she felt it was important to be inside of the courtroom for this case. I mean, it just goes to show how many people have been touched by this case, touched by Dan Markel's story, and have continued through all of these years. And we heard the mention of how the prosecution team has carefully guided this case to this point. There's also the law enforcement agencies that have been involved. I noticed Agent Pat Sanford with the FBI. He has been, of course, on the stand in all of these trials, but he's always in the gallery for the closing arguments. And that was not different today. He was there watching all of this unfold, someone who shepherded this case from before the bump and through the arrest of Donna Adelson inside of that airport. So many layers of people and emotions inside of that courtroom. Donna Adelson, you mentioned, was distraught, was shaking her head in response to that victim impact statement throughout. I saw her looking back at her husband like, what happened? I can't believe this. I mean, she truly seemed shocked. And we don't usually see that from defendants, especially if their attorneys have told them this is possible, that it's coming. I noticed when Harvey left, he did not want to speak. I did ask him if he wanted to say anything in light of this verdict, but you could see he did have tears in his eyes when he left. So it has been one of those verdicts that just leaves an impact, Ted, no doubt.
Absolutely. You talked about the closings. Let's go through those for people that didn't have an opportunity to see them today. Very passionate on both sides. Let's start with the prosecution.
Yeah, Georgia Kappelman gave a pretty lengthy closing argument. They both got 2 hours, but hers was 2 hours on the front end. And she spent a lot of time making sure these jurors understood how Donna was at the top of this because she's the only one who stood to really gain. That Wendy had made peace with being in Tallahassee, perhaps. That the hitmen would not have done this because they would not have been paid or been told about Dan Markel. And that even Charlie, the person who was in the middle of all of this and got this done, that even he could not have been the mastermind. Take a listen.
When Charlie asked Donna on State's 99 call A,
what's this?
does it involve me or other people? Well, probably both of us. That is direct evidence. If anyone in that jury room wants to acquit her, make them tell you how that is not a confession.
Okay, Ted, that was a different piece of sound than I was expecting, but that was an important one, too. The other one was Charlie being shown as someone who was a playboy, not someone who was interested in his sister's love life or the custody battle, that he would not have done it if the woman in his life, which was his mother, had not have insisted to help her with this problem. Now, what you just heard was something that Prosecutor Kappelman called direct evidence. The defense kept saying this was a circumstantial case, but Georgia Kappelman said, I know you all like direct evidence. This is a confession because after that bump, this is the recorded call of Donna Adelson saying this probably involves the two of us. So she said that's really all you need in this case to know that she was absolutely involved.
Yeah, and the defense leaned into the lack of evidence linking Donna with anything prior to the murder. You know, before Dan Markel's dead, they leaned into the lack of direct evidence. There's nothing here that, you know, points to her as being this mastermind. But at the end of the day, that fell short.
It did fall short. The defense gave a rousing closing argument. It was one that was full of a lot of passion. Jackie Fulford had the tenor that really kept the jurors' interest, I think, in terms of just she was loud enough and passionate enough to where they weren't falling asleep even though it was after lunch. But I did notice that she spent a lot of time not only accepting that, yes, there may be some motive evidence, there may be ugly names, but that is not enough to equal murder. She kept hammering that point over and over, focusing on what happened before, not really focusing as much on what happened in the middle and what happened after the murder. Take a listen.
She said some ugly things, and she meddles in her children's lives. Meddles in their lives. Gets involved in their divorce. She's a parent. She's just being a parent, not a killer. She's a meddler, not a murderer. They haven't proven that to you.
Now, I saw a lot of care between this legal team and their client's husband, often comforting Donna Adelson when she needed it, trying to keep her calm when the judge said, you're going to be held in contempt if you can't keep it together. Even during the time that we were waiting for the jury to deliberate, I noticed Jackie Fulford walking slowly with Harvey down the halls, just talking, perhaps encouraging him during this period. But you could tell that this hurt for them to see that verdict and their client to be taken away and put in handcuffs, but that is the outcome. That is the decision of the jury, and we'll have that final sentencing. But in Florida, for first-degree murder, which he's convicted of, that top count, the sentence is life without parole. There's no getting around that.
Yeah, so she will spend the rest of her life in prison. Judge alluded to that. Before I let you go quickly, for folks that didn't see it, the big question is, what about Wendy, maybe even Harvey? What's your take of the tea leaves reading after talking to Georgia Kappelman? She was a bit coy, but definitely didn't go one way or another on the record.
She didn't say no. She didn't say no, Ted. And she didn't want to answer that question, which is not surprising. She didn't want to answer that question 2 years ago after Charlie's trial. She chastised us as the media last year because before we even said good job on the verdict or how does it feel to get a conviction against Charlie, everyone was already asking, what about Donna? What about Donna? So we held back this time around to ask her the questions, but she repeatedly said she did not want to talk about Wendy, but I did ask her whether or not she felt she used more evidence about Wendy in this trial, and she agreed that that was the case. So we don't know for sure, but from watching all of these trials, being in the courtroom for 2 of them now, it does seem like a pattern. During Charlie's trial, we heard more about Donna, and then Donna was arrested. And now during Donna's trial, we're hearing a lot more about Wendy. Who knows if we see a trial in the future or charges for Wendy. Keep in mind, it was only a short amount of time after Charlie's conviction that arrest was made of Donna. That could have been moved up, perhaps, because she decided to try and leave the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that had a lot to do with it, catching her before she went out off to Vietnam. Julia Janae, fantastic job covering the trial for us. Thank you. Let's bring in the tank. Richard Grundy is still with us. He's a former prosecutor. He's had some big wins in his day. Josh Colesrud is back with us, along with Joanna Diaz. Joanna, you've been in Tallahassee. You went to school at Florida State. Talk about if you would, how much within the Florida State legal community this case has been followed, and just the effect of Dan Markel, your former professor, his death had on the community there.
I think overall, Florida State just has a really tight community. I mean, the alumni continue to be involved. It's a very, it's a big football school. Everybody likes to come back and be part of the boosters. And so I think it was shocking when it happens. I'm no longer in Tallahassee. I'm in California, but I still get news of what's going on and still, get the updates and track the trial. But I think overall, the dynamic and what people were expecting was justice for Dan Markel. And, time after time after time now, that is what the state attorney's office has been providing, actively working on this case, developing the evidence, putting forth a strong prosecution, and getting the verdicts that they've gotten to date.
Josh, what's your take? We were talking last block with Mike King was in with us. What do you think about Wendy and maybe Harvey? But it seems as though if there is a next step, and that's the way this has gone thus far, that the next step would be the wife, Wendy. What's your take? What's your gut tell you, and whether or not she should be worried tonight?
Well, she should definitely be worried, but if I were a betting man, I would bet that the state is not going to press charges against her, and I'll tell you why. First, they've had 11 years to press charges against her, and they haven't done so. And if you recall, the only reason why they were able to bring charges against Donna was because, number one, they initiated a street performance, so to speak, where they gave her a note and wanted, from a ransom note, and wanted to see how she reacts, right?
A bump. Yes.
And they also had the jailhouse snitches. So they had some evidence that came in later that were really able to help them bring charges against Donna. And I don't know if they're going to have that kind of stuff against Wendy. I think that they need more than just suspicion, because it's hard to imagine that this murder took place without Wendy knowing, because she has the most to gain from it, right? And you're telling me that the family did this for her benefit, and she had no idea? Probably not, but you're going to have more than just suspicion.
Yeah. Richard, what was the biggest bit of evidence here? You've got the bump, Donna's reaction to the bump, the phone calls to Charlie. You have the flight to Vietnam. You also had the other son, Rob, come into the courtroom and talk about mom and how she said, don't talk to the FBI. Before you answer, let's listen to him on the stand, basically saying, Mom told me don't talk to the cops.
After that conversation with, you said it was the FBI earlier, right?
Yes.
Okay. After that conversation with the FBI, did Donna Adelson ever say anything to you about having talked to law enforcement or the FBI?
It was either that afternoon or the next day, but, and she called me and said, just want to let you know, if the police come around, don't talk to them.
Okay, so she told you not to talk to law enforcement.
Correct.
Did you let her know that you already had talked to law enforcement?
Yeah, I said I already did.
What did she say to that?
She said, "Oh, well, you don't know anything anyway."
You don't know anything anyway?
Correct.
Richard, how important was that testimony?
I'll pat myself on the back a little bit before the trial started, and I was asked who I thought the most important witness was. I settled on Rob over a couple of other votes that people had for Wendy, because the position that he was in, he was such a powerful witness, because no matter what the question was, his answer was, where it could have been a yes, no, leave it there, was more to the point. And it screamed, jury, I know this woman better than you ever will, and she did it. And that message, I think, really came across strong and clear. The Vietnam one, I agree with you. I think those were the two, Rob and Vietnam, were the big obvious ones, and that's just a gift. That's a gift to the prosecutor. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. The other thing is there was these things that they used very well. What was the motivation, according to the prosecution? The grandchildren. What did they do after this man was dead? They totally tore these kids away from those grandparents. In other words, they acted exactly the way they said they wanted to, the reason that this individual was killed. If you had a little common sense there, you would have shed your tears. You would have brought the troops together. You would have showered these other grandparents with these grandchildren. Instead, they went right down the path that proved this little subtlety that this is what they wanted. We're going to change their name. We're going to take them away from you.
Yeah, the Markels had to get a state law passed so that they could get some visitation with their grandkids because that was not going to come from the Adelsons. Let's get a break. More reaction to Donna Adelson going down. Ooh, she's guilty. She's like, no way. They found me. She couldn't believe it. Well, the jury didn't take them long to come to their verdict. More reaction when we return to closing arguments.
I wish that every day of her remaining days, she thinks about the harm she has caused to so many, especially those two boys she claims to have loved so much. For these reasons, Your Honor, I ask the court sentence Donna Adelson to the maximum possible sentence. And my only short question to Donna, was it worth it?
Was it worth it? That was the question Phil Markel, Dan Markel's father, asked Donna Adelson. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. We all knew what she was thinking. She shook her head in denial during a lot of those victim impact statements from Ruth Markel and then from Phil Markel. At one point he said, you know, it's a Jewish tradition to wish people that they live to 120 years. And that's what I'm doing for Donna. I hope she lives 120 years in the big house in Florida, is basically what he said. One of the things that happened today that took a few people back a little bit was a couple things. Well, first of all, Donna Adelson decided not to testify after the defense had sort of signaled that she was going to. Georgia Kappelman said she was ready for the cross-examination, was ready to roll. And then today, the defense made the strategic move to get rid of the lesser included charges, meaning that the jury would only have those top charges on their menu when they went back to deliberate the fate of Donna Adelson. It was all or nothing. Judge Stephen Everett made sure that the defendant knew what she was doing, and he asked her about it.
Ms. Adelson, you understand that lesser included crimes are something that is available depending on what is charged as a crime.
I understand that, Colonel.
Do you also understand as well, if you waive your ability for the jury to make this finding, they can only make a finding as to what is charged first-degree murder?
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
In consulting with your attorneys, you understand the strategy of waiving all lesser included crimes?
I do, Your Honor.
Is there anything that you need to consult with them further about concerning this matter?
No, there is, Your Honor.
Then you may be seated. As to the jury instructions, I will remove second-degree murder and manslaughter as options.
All right, let's bring back Josh Colesrud, Joanna Nevis, and joining our discussion, criminal defense attorney, former district attorney Matthew Mangino. He's in Pennsylvania this evening. One eye, I'm sure, on the Eagles, another on Donna Adelson. Matthew, welcome, and I want to get your reaction to this strategic decision. A, don't put Donna on the stand, and then B, get rid of the lesser includeds. Don't let the jury pick something lower. I mean, she's 75 years old. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, with regard to taking the stand, you know, I thought that she needed to try to at least explain away some of these circumstances. You know, you bring witnesses in to say, you know, she was just going to Vietnam to clear her head. You know, I thought that the jurors needed to hear that from her if she was going to try to make that case, although I think it would have been an uphill battle either way. You know, with regard to their strategy to get rid of the lesser included offenses, you know, I think they must have been thinking that, hey, if we leave this jury with only first degree murder, you know, maybe the prosecution didn't convince everyone on this jury that she's responsible for first degree murder. We don't want there to be a compromise verdict where she gets something less. I mean, I think they might have to be sitting back thinking, was that the best strategy? I see what they were trying to do, but obviously neither one of their decisions worked out the way they wanted them to. She's convicted on the most serious offenses, all the charges left.
True. Josh, let's face it, she's convicted of a lesser. She's probably dying in prison because of her age.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out, that she's probably thinking that, any guilty verdict, including a lesser included, is a death sentence, right? So for her, it was all or nothing. You either find me guilty or don't find me guilty. I don't want the jury to split the baby here. And frankly, I probably would have done the same thing after talking to her if I was 75 years old. So her not taking the witness stand, I agree with my colleague that the defense needed to be a little bit more aggressive with their story. In fact, they needed to have a story. And the only way that they could give an alternate explanation, absent witnesses, is to have her take the witness stand. And in a case that's built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence, where all the insinuations were given in favor of the prosecution, you have to have a story from the defense that makes sense, not just poking holes in what the state is saying, but humanizing, like we said last hour, humanizing the defendant, which, they didn't do in this case.
No, Joanna, putting her on might have been the opposite, but it was Hail Mary time in a lot of people's minds. They just didn't want to risk it.
Yeah, I think that many people expected her to testify. Georgia indicated that she was prepared with all the questions for cross-examination, and, it may have seemed intimidating. But, when we hear that the defense refers to her as a grandmother who just loved her kids and meddled in the lives of her children, and she's just a parent that does this, and she was a teacher, and you hear all of this background, we still want to hear from her, even though, of course, she's not required to testify. I think that if anything was going to have an impact on the jury about this defendant and who she was as a person, that putting her on the stand may have actually softened it up a bit, rather than the story that was painted of her being this contrived person that maliciously did these things to control the outcomes of, everybody's lives at this point.
Yeah, nobody felt sorry for her because the deliberation time just wasn't very long. And at the end of the day, nobody on that jury, not one of the 12, thought, no, I can't do this for this poor old woman. They just didn't get that, and it didn't come through during the trial. Let's get a break. When we come back, more of our reaction to Donna Adelson's guilty verdicts. All three guilty on all counts. Our continuing coverage on closing arguments continues right after this.
Friday night.
We're live from Denver for CrimeCon 2025. See what special guests join us at the world's biggest true crime event.
Closing arguments. Live from CrimeCon. Friday night, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
Saturday nights on ION is our night. Let's go! Double headers every Saturday at 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern. The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment, first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Mrs. Adelson, control yourself. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the indictment, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Count 3. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 3 of the indictment, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. The defendant is guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. And it is signed and dated by the foreperson.
Judge Everett, in his unique style, delivering the verdicts to Donna Adelson. She thought there was a pretty good chance she was going home tonight, and she's going to be going to her new home in the Florida prison system for the rest of her life. Let's bring back our think tank as we continue to absorb the guilty verdicts of Donna Adelson, Josh Colesrud, Joanna Nieves, and Matthew Mangino. Matthew, what's your take on Wendy? Is she next? And you, with your prosecutor hat, it's not like they don't know the case. This has been years and years. It's been 11 years. They know exactly what they have against Wendy, what they don't. What you're probably not going to get, though, from an investigative standpoint, is a gift like Donna gave them with her one-way ticket to Vietnam. But do you think they've got her phones tapped and are monitoring her, looking for a little gift?
Well, Ted, it would shock me that the person who was the point of all this, who was the point of this tragic murder, her and her children, and her brother would be involved in it, her mother would be involved in it, these 3 other people ultimately convicted for their part in it, and they would all do this, or at least mom and brother do this without including her, without her involvement in any way. That really kind of stretches the realm of reality, that they're going to go to bat for her, and now they're going to take this life in prison rap as a result of it. I don't know. I mean, prosecutors, I think they jumped on Donna because she was about to leave the country. They may have other angles that they were still pursuing at the time, but they had to take action with her because she was leaving the country. I don't know, frankly, what the future holds for Wendy here, and if there's going to be, further investigation or possibly a prosecution.
Or even Harvey. Joanna, your thoughts?
I'm the one that thinks that they were knocking dominoes down one by one by one, and that Wendy is not off the hook. I understand that there may be some difficulty with establishing maybe some more direct evidence as it comes to her, but they've got loads and loads of digital evidence, emails, the same type underlying motive as it related to Donna's basis for the conspiracy and solicitation. I think that if anybody's going to be pursued after this trial, it will be Wendy.
Josh, you said you don't think Wendy's going down here. You don't think they're going to pull the trigger. And is it because you don't think they can win? And does that really matter if they really think she's involved?
Sure. So, I was a prosecutor for almost 15 years, and we would never bring a case unless we felt like there was a reasonable likelihood of conviction. And the state is the only one that can answer that question. Now, one of the things that is a little different about all of these cases is that they weren't tried together jointly. They were tried separately. If they had a case against Wendy, why not bring it at the same time they prosecute Donna? Because it's sometimes easier to convict 2 defendants because there's, an idea of guilt by association almost when you have all this circumstantial evidence against Donna. And it's not a giant leap to then impute that against Wendy. So why wait? Nothing else has changed over the last 11 years. So, what's happening? So that's why I feel like if they were going to bring charges, they would have done so already.
Either lopped her in or maybe picked her off earlier on. Yeah, we'll see. We don't know. That's the big question tonight. The one question we do know is what's going to happen to Donna. She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison. Our thanks to the tank. Thanks for watching this special edition of Closing Arguments. Make sure to join us tomorrow because Vinny's going to be live from CrimeCon in Denver, starting 8 o'clock Eastern Time, then 9 o'clock. Special interview on VPI. Vinny's going to sit down with Colby Ryan. Lori Vallow, Daybell's surviving son, is going to join Vinny. That is at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. You do not want to miss that interview. Talking to Colby about his mother, all of it. Coming to you live from CrimeCon. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Ted Rowlands in for Vinny. This is Court TV.